This is CBC Vancouver News.
So this is probably going to affect many of our community members.
A helicopter crash kills 2 contract workers and injures 4 others outside Prince George. Plus,
to deliver the housing that we all know that they need to deliver to meet the demands of their community.
If you don't, we will. The province unveils housing targets for 10 cities that have fallen behind on supply. And
probably we didn't make clear enough that COVID was never gone.
COVID rates are on the rise. Are lax attitudes to blame? Good evening, I'm Tanya Fletcher. Tragedy has struck northern BC. 2 people have died in a helicopter crash and 4 others ended up in the hospital. The chopper and all 6 people on board were contracted by a forestry company. Kate Partridge is at the scene near Prince George with the latest.
This parking lot at the Purden Lake Resort suddenly turned into a staging area for emergency responders. In the nearby forest, a helicopter crashed around 7:45 a.m. about 50 kilometers east of Prince George. 2 people were killed. The other 4 were taken to hospital. Forestry company Canfor says the aircraft and its passengers were contracted to do field survey work for the company. RCMP say they won't be releasing the names of the victims.
We do know that they were local to the Prince George area, so this is probably going to affect many of our community members as the information starts to get out and spread.
Northern Health says the other 4 people involved in the crash are in good condition and may be discharged to recover at home. RCMP expressed condolences to the victims' families and say all future updates will come from the Transportation Safety Board and the BC Coroner's Service. Both agencies will be investigating simultaneously. Kate Partridge, CBC News, Prince George.
A Vancouver man has been found dead on the Sunshine Coast, and it's being investigated as suspicious. On Saturday, 58-year-old Henry Doyle was discovered on a forestry road near Egmont. He had traveled to the area on his dirt bike, which was found near his body. Homicide investigators have deemed the death suspicious, with foul play suspected. Well, the RCMP honored a fallen officer with a procession through the Fraser Valley today. A motorcade escorted the body of Constable Rick O'Brien from the Abbotsford Hospital along Highway 1 to a nearby funeral home. The 51-year-old father of 6 was gunned down last Friday while executing a search warrant for a drug investigation at a home in Coquitlam. He was a decorated constable with the Ridge Meadows RCMP detachment and had recently celebrated 7 years of service. A planned announcement by the federal government for new housing in Burnaby and Surrey was abruptly cancelled today. It's all because of Ottawa's concern about new taxes being proposed by Metro Vancouver that would escalate the cost of building new developments. Our Justin McElroy is here to break it all down for us. So, Justin, what exactly were the feds supposed to announce here?
Yeah, they put out this announcement yesterday that they were going to be holding a press conference. The mayors of Burnaby and Surrey were expecting to hear that they would be getting each in the tens of billions of dollars for affordable housing next to transit hubs. And then the Minister of Housing, Sean Fraser, put out this statement on X, formerly Twitter, just an hour before that, saying that in light of a proposed development cost charge increase by Metro Vancouver, I postponed today's announcement with 2 cities, those being Burnaby and Surrey. We're studying the impacts of the proposal, and I hope to have more to say soon. Now, that proposal has been talked about for Metro Vancouver for several months, and essentially, in order to pay for all the new wastewater treatment plants and renovations that they have on the go, which are in place because of all the growth that has happened in Metro Vancouver, anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 will be put on new developments per housing unit if this proposed budget passes in the next couple months. So the federal government has said that they're not on board with that. They want to re-examine this deal before going ahead. But it's the question of, for all this infrastructure that's coming into the region, should it be current taxpayers increasing their property taxes to pay for it? Should it be these new developments that are coming in? Today it delayed this big housing announcement. It'll be interesting to see what Metro Vancouver does in response.
Okay, now this comes the same day the province had its own housing news. Take us through that.
Yeah, this was in the works for a while. People might remember months ago, Housing Minister Ravi Kahlon announcing the 10 municipalities that they were going to force to put in new housing targets to build more over the next 5 years. Otherwise, they may usurp them and take over some land use management. Well, today they announced what those housing targets were. Here's a chart on screen that shows the Big 10, Vancouver, Victoria, Saanich, Kamloops, and a number of suburban communities in Metro Van and Greater Victoria. And you can see it goes up to just under 30,000 units for Vancouver that they're going to be forced to build, at least that number, over the next 5 years. Much smaller for, say, Oak Bay and West Vancouver. But when you look at it in terms of per capita, every municipality is being asked to grow about the same over the next 5 years, somewhere between 8 to 14%. So the question is going to be twofold. Can municipalities ramp up their housing in order to meet these targets? And if they don't, what will the province actually do to step in and possibly take over control of land use, which normally is the domain of cities?
All right, thank you. That's our municipal affairs reporter, Justin McElroy, joining us. Well, as those housing targets were announced, Premier David Eby was wrapping up 2 days of meetings in Ottawa. He says he hoped to get more support from the federal government to help the province's housing affordability crisis.
I note that in our meetings, it's pretty clear that the federal government's not yet in a position to be able to share with us what their plan is for their renewed housing strategy coming out of their caucus meeting recently.
Eby says he also lobbied the feds for funding tied to major infrastructure projects. In a landmark decision, the BC Supreme Court has ruled the current system for granting rights to mining companies in this province is unconstitutional. Currently, mineral claims can be made online for a nominal fee. No consultation with Indigenous people is necessary. Well, the province now has 18 months to work with First Nations and come up with a new constitutionally valid system. Well, COVID rates are back on the rise in BC, and it's prompting concerns from some infectious disease specialists and even BC's Human Rights Commissioner. As Yasmin Pernea explains, a part of the reason is people have become less careful post-pandemic.
Probably we didn't make clear enough that COVID was never gone.
Infectious disease specialists are worried about an increase in COVID-19 cases in BC. New figures from the BC Centre for Disease Control show COVID cases, hospitalizations, and deaths all increased during the 4-week period of August 20th to September 16th. There were 178 COVID hospitalizations reported in the final week alone, and reported deaths jumped from 10 deaths in the first week to 22 in the final week. And experts say it appears etiquette around COVID has changed too.
I think over the past several months, people tend to try and power through some sort of respiratory illness as they did before the pandemic, and that's probably not a good idea.
I've heard of and seen more kids coming to school with runny noses and cough and stuff again.
Masking and self-isolation requirements have long been scrapped in BC, but the BC CDC still recommends people stay home as much as possible if they have COVID symptoms. Doctors say this is especially significant to protect immunocompromised people who still need to take precautions. BC's Human Rights Commissioner agrees.
My office hears from people saying, I am so restricted in how I live my life. I am so fearful for my family or for my child who might be disproportionately impacted.
Infectious disease experts are encouraging British Columbians to take the updated COVID-19 vaccine targeting the main virus strain currently circulating when it becomes available. BC's Ministry of Health tells CBC News it will have more information to share on its plans for the respiratory virus season in the coming days. Yasmin Pernea, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, private long-term care facilities are underspending on patient care. That's according to BC Seniors Advocate. She says reform is needed because for-profit operators are not delivering on the care hours the province gives them funding for.
The not-for-profit sector is delivering many, many more care hours than the for-profit sector, even though they're effectively funded the same for them. So in 21-22, which is the period we've reviewed in this report, the not-for-profit sector delivered 93,000 care hours more than they were funded to deliver, and the for-profit sector delivered 500,000 hours less than they were funded to deliver.
It has been exactly 8 years to the day since a young Indigenous man with a disability died in a BC hospital after being denied proper care by nurses and doctors. Well, now a regulator responsible for nurses in this province says it's working to dismantle systemic racism that played a role in his death. As Angela Starrett reports, some say the changes should have come a long time ago.
Keegan was a chess player, a really, really good chess player. He was a pianist as well.
Rihanna Millman was Keegan Combs' caregiver, friend, and advocate.
He loved Starbucks. That was like our guilty pleasure.
The 29-year-old who had disabilities and was nonverbal by choice was also enrolled in trade school. Rihanna met him at her community program where she became his support worker.
During that time, Keegan became like family to us. In the days that I wasn't supporting Keegan, I would ask him if he would like to come for dinner or to baseball games or anything that our family was participating in, and his answer was always this little tiny yes.
Eventually, she and her husband welcomed Keegan into their home, and Rihanna became his primary caregiver. He was thriving for 2 years until a treatable accident changed everything.
And when I got in there, Keegan was sitting in the oversized chair, and there was food and vomit. I asked him what was going on, and he just kept saying he didn't know.
She called 911, and despite advice that Keegan was okay to stay home, Rihanna pressed paramedics to rush him to hospital. Once at the Chilliwack General, Keegan couldn't stand and was rocking back and forth, his symptoms brushed aside.
He was profiled like he was either intoxicated or he was under the influence of something and he just needed to sleep it off.
Then, she says, a series of events unfolded that further failed him. According to a report called Remembering Keegan, despite blood work showing methanol in his blood at 8 p.m., Keegan was not diagnosed for 12 hours. He was supposed to be checked on every 2 hours, but there was nothing on his file for 6. And then
at 3:30 in the morning, he was restrained to his bed and he was left there unattended until past 7 o'clock in the morning. Nobody checked on him again. And he was left there to die alone, restrained to a bed.
Later, it was found that Keegan may have mistaken windshield wiper fluid for an energy drink. The delay in diagnosis and treatment for his accidental ingestion of poison, treatable if caught in time, led to his tragic death on September 26, 2015.
I had never seen such egregious behavior in my entire life.
She blames anti-Indigenous racism and discrimination for his death.
It's like the perpetual systemic dismissal of the individual because of bias and discrimination. That's the system that we're trying to shift.
Inspired in part by Keegan's story, BC's nurses regulator is working, they say, to dismantle anti-Indigenous racism in BC healthcare. And to a degree, it has the power to do it. The BC College of Nurses and Midwives sets standards for nurses and midwives in BC and has the power to discipline those who fall short, including revoking a license. It reviews all BC nursing education programs and courses that prepare graduates for registration, and it manages and navigates complaints that come into the college. The nurses who neglected Keegan were not disciplined. Johansson says, to her knowledge, a complaint was not lodged, but points to a further barrier in the healthcare system.
So why aren't people reporting concerns? Well, again, we are part of the system that has been causing that harm.
It also introduced a new practice standard for nurses to reflect on their own biases and to call out racist behavior by colleagues. And it's pushing for anti-racism education and training for new nurses.
It took a long time for his legacy to have the impact, the commitment of Fraser Health Authority around addressing systemic racism happened many years after his passing.
Fraser Health, the authority responsible for the hospital, has since apologized and says it's implementing recommendations in the 2020 In Plain Sight report on anti-Indigenous racism in BC healthcare. As for Millman, she's frustrated that change is so slow to come, even all these years later.
We need to start calling behaviors what they are, policies what they are, beliefs what they are. And the quicker we get to that, hopefully the sooner we'll get to a place of cultural safety and humility, but we won't get there until we become anti-racist.
I'm so proud of you.
Angela Starrett, CBC News, Vancouver.
In Prince George, 3 people had to be hospitalized after a string of coyote attacks this morning. BC Conservation Officer Service says they all happened within 45 minutes of each other in Connaught Hill Park. One coyote is believed to be responsible for all of them. All of the people attacked are homeless. The park is now closed. And to some exciting sports news, the Canadian women's soccer team is going to the Olympics. The Canadian team clinched a spot in the 2024 Paris Games after defeating Jamaica 4-1 in an Olympic qualifying game earlier this evening. Coming up, we'll take a look at the inspiring life and legacy of BC's first Black Supreme Court judge. Stay with us. And thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream. A Vancouver woman will be able to keep her beloved Guineafowls after a year-long dispute with the city. Officials ordered her to remove her 2 hens from her property after neighbors complained the birds were too noisy. The matter ended up in court, and she won. Here she is.
Interesting to me that the approach that the city took to this case wasn't focusing on the allegations of noise, but really focused on my right to have these animals. I wasn't keeping Ghost in Darkness for their meat or, gonna steal all their feathers or, use them primarily for egg production. Eventually the supervisor said, well, if you don't like it, you have 2 options. You can either petition the city to change the bylaws or, you can take it to court. If I lost, my birds may be kind of confiscated or, taken by the city. And given the conversations that I had had with the animal control officer and his supervisor, they knew nothing about these birds. They knew nothing about their history. And so just as a precautionary measure, I rehomed them. They weren't flighty. They loved humans, loved being around people, and were good with other animals. So they were rehomed with her and they were very happy. But that allowed me to focus on the court case and winning the court case, making those arguments without having to worry about the safety or well-being of Ghost in Darkness, my guineafowl. They were animals that I cared for since they were super small little fuzzy things. And it was hard.
And how are they doing now?
They're doing very well. They're doing very well.
Welcome back. A giant of BC's legal profession has died. Selwyn Romilly was the first Black judge in BC, and he's being remembered today as a trailblazer and a role model who broke barriers in this province. Michelle Gassou brings us more on his life and the legacy he now leaves behind.
I was the only Black in law school. This was the 60s when there was a lot of turmoil.
Selwyn Romilly blazed trails, becoming BC's first Black judge despite overwhelming barriers.
There are no Black judges. There were no interracial judges. It was a white bench.
Romilly died of cancer at his home on Friday night. He was 83 years old.
To avoid some of the injustices that we seem to have.
Romilly was born in Trinidad and Tobago in 1940 and moved to Canada as a young man. He attended UBC Law School in the 60s. As the only Black student, his challenges were immense.
As a young Black man, he couldn't get a dishwashing job, so he had to start in the mines. And he used to deliver food in the prisons, and he had to work his way up to a dishwashing job, so he was extremely ecstatic when he got a dishwashing job.
After graduation, Romilly moved his family north to Smithers, where he opened his first practice. He made history in 1974 with his appointment to the provincial court. Then again in 1995, when he was named a BC Supreme Court Justice.
He was known for being an eminent jurist, from my perspective, and a mentor to everybody in the profession. And he was certainly a role model for people of color to come along behind and break those barriers as well.
As a judge, his legal rulings were known for their elegance and storytelling, even their humor.
He had an amazing sense of humor. And that's what many people remember about him. Even in his court cases, he was known for finding amazing quotes and kind of was jokingly called the quoting judge for much of his career.
In May of 2021, while on a walk in Stanley Park, he was wrongly detained and handcuffed by Vancouver police. The incident resulted in formal apologies from the VPD and the city and pushed Romilly to advocate for reform around handcuffing and racial profiling.
I think he strongly believed that, you can use the system to try to address injustice. And I think with the police incident that happened in Stanley Park, in the end, what ended up happening is they changed the legislation around handcuffing.
Romilly is remembered as pragmatic and persistent in the face of racial discrimination, a brilliant legal mind, a mentor, a father, and a friend. Michelle Gassou, CBC News, Vancouver.
Here's a live shot of a soggy downtown Vancouver, and this fall storm is still hanging over the south coast. We'll have your 5-day forecast next.
This is the home of the Keegan First Nation. Not the whole building, just this small apartment. The band office, a spare bedroom.
And your name again was?
The chief, Rhonda Larrabee, half native, half Chinese. A status Indian for less than 7 years, she is the main reason there is a band. In the 1850s, the New Westminster Band was moved to reservations at the Scott Paper site, Poplar Island, and Surrey's Bridgeview. Those lands were sold out from under them in 1916. Between that and smallpox, a nation of 170 ceased to be. Larrabee's mother, Marie Joseph, was Keegan. A product of the residential schools, she denied her native heritage and entered the white world. Her daughter always felt something was missing.
I just thought, I have to do something about this because I just felt incomplete. I mean, I knew all my heritage from one side, but I needed to have the heritage from my mom's side.
So in 1991, Larrabee applied to be a status Indian. The New Westminster Band was reborn. The family elected her chief.
I was the whole band.
And now you're?
My brothers are registered. My 3 grandchildren are native.
Then began the task of becoming native. What didn't she know?
Everything. Everything. Oh, I didn't know that.
Like fishing. The band got its first food fishery permit last fall.
You had to learn how to fish.
We haven't quite learned yet, but we're fishing with the help of the Cape Sea Indian Band.
and the band was forced to deal with land claims.
When I got my status and started receiving phone calls, well, you have to do something. There are overlapping claim issues. You have to pursue this. You have to make a land claim. And I said, but I don't want to. I just wanted to be part of my mom.
But the Keeite are filing for a land claim, 40 acres at the corner of McBride and Columbia, woodlands. It had been the site of their traditional village before reserves. Now they want it back to build a convention center, a school, a community center.
Something for the entire community to use, to be booked, and maybe even run by or in connection with the city of New Westminster.
An ambitious plan for a band of a handful, trying to regain what was lost to several hundred. Alan Waterman, CBC News, New Westminster.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver Inbox. CBC Vancouver is the exclusive media partner of the Jade Music Festival, October 18th to the 20th. The festival features a variety of events that showcase Chinese-Canadian music and entertainment. And on October 21st, support youth arts education with Gloria Makarenko at Splash, Arts Umbrella's 41st annual gala and art auction. Tickets at artsumbrella.com.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace. To cool and clean the air in your home, call Direct Buy Furnace. Installing Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
Darius Madavi joins us now with our look at the forecast. And Darius, this storm system has been making its way through, I know a little slowly the further east it goes. Has it made much difference for the wildfires?
It has, fortunately. We've seen some of those showers push their way into the interior. It's brought our fire danger down a ton on the coast, and you can see the impact here in the southern interior as well. I know it's been a while since we've looked at one of these maps, but it's nice to have some good news in terms of all that rain that we had. Some places on the coast saw as much as 90 to 100 millimeters in just 24 hours yesterday. So good that some of that rain that was raising our risk of flooding has actually made a difference in terms of our fire danger. I know that we've heard that this might be a fire season ender for parts of the coast. It's nice to see that reflected in our fire danger. You can see here, this is earlier today, we saw some of that rain making its way up into the South Island and onto the the lower mainland as well. Some good news here. We did see some drizzles, but sort of popping in and out. Tomorrow we'll see a pretty similar thing, maybe a bit more rain, but Thursday will be the next time we see some good rain coming down. If you take a look here at our 48-hour forecast, it's a bit that moves in tomorrow, and then we get a much darker green as we head into Thursday. You can see that here when we zoom in. Again, lots of snow moving up here, so I had to change the title here from rain to precipitation, so really marking the changing of the season. In terms of temperatures, we are staying suppressed, so especially for places like Kelowna, this is quite a bit lower than we usually are this time of year, just a few degrees below seasonal between, for some places like Kamloops, 2 degrees, for places like Kelowna, as much as 7 degrees below seasonal tomorrow. Similar story on Thursday, temperatures come up a little bit in some places, down in others, and similar story once again on Friday, even as some sun starts poking through for the south. In terms of our conditions tomorrow, expect more of the same. Some rain happening for the south. Probably not more thunderstorms. Those are our highest chance are tonight. Bit of rain escaping, golden escaping that rain, and some clearing up in the north, which should continue through the end of this week. And here in Vancouver, we see that we have rain over the next few days, and then we do start to clear up. Saturday and Sunday should be a fairly sunny affair.
All right, we will keep the sunglasses handy, but mainly the umbrella. Thanks so much, Darius.
Thanks, Tanya.
And that is your late news for this Tuesday. For news anytime, anywhere, you can download our free CBC News app. You can always get the latest online as well. We're at cbc.ca/BC. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night.